to speak or make a comment, please raise your hand and I'll be around with the wireless microphone. We want to make sure that your comments are captured by the audio, and in order for that to happen, it needs to be mic'd through the sound system. So just raise your hand and one of us will be around with a wireless mic before you start speaking. Yes, let me get you one. Hang on one second.
I'll get it. Just in case families come, I just want to be there. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Marcia Jones con la oficina de ISOL. Si hay alguna persona presente que necesita la interpretación de esta junta en español, favor de venir a buscarme. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. You can hand that to Chris. So thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Matthew Cropper. I'm with Cropper GIS Consulting, and I'm the consultant that's going to be working with you guys as we work through this capacity relief boundary study for Pleasant Plains Elementary School. We come from, we're actually based out of Ohio, but we do this kind of work all over the United States, and our expertise is just this type of work. We've done a lot of work with the Baltimore County Public Schools, and we're honored to be working with you guys on this process. And so I'm here. You're going to see me at all the meetings and facilitating these meetings with you as a committee and also working with the public. And before we get into the meat of the agenda tonight, I'd like to go around the table. We'll hand the mic around the table, and everybody can just introduce themselves, maybe what school you're from, and a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Hello, I'm Rick Wade, Hampton Elementary School teacher.
Good evening, Joyce Albert, Principal, Pleasant Plains Elementary.
I'm Ryan Riddle. I'm a parent of 2 students at Pleasant Plains and also the PTA president.
Good evening, I'm Jen Knoll, Principal of Halstead Academy.
Hello, I'm Tangier Hollis. I'm a parent of a student at Halstead Academy.
Hi, I'm Jessica Jackson. I have 2 students at Hampton Elementary.
Hi, I'm Patricia Kaiser, the principal of Hampton Elementary.
Vanya Dabney, and I'm a parent of 2 students at Pleasant Plains Elementary.
Tierra Taylor. I have 3 students at Halstead Academy.
Natalie Etter, I'm a teacher at Halstead Academy.
Lisa Adele, a teacher at Pleasant Plains.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Cully. I have now 2 students at Hampton.
Hi, I'm Amy Freeman, and I chair the Central Area Education Advisory Council.
Okay, thank you very much. And we also welcome the public to these meetings. As you know, we value, and the school district values an open and transparent process. And so the public is always welcome to come, watch the work of the committee. All that we ask is that you observe and not participate as they do some of their important work around the tables and as they work through this process. But welcome to the public as well. And so we also have supporting us a BCPS office staff, people from planning and facilities and things like that, and transportation. And so those folks will be here around the table to help answer you questions for you and give you information as it relates to things that I may not be able to help with as it relates to the school district. So our agenda for tonight is we're going to 7:30 p.m. We want to go over the goals, the calendar objectives, talk a little bit about this background report. Everybody should have picked up a binder, and I see a binder in front of everybody when you came in. We ask that you bring this binder with you to every single meeting, and we will be giving you more materials as every meeting, at the beginning of every meeting, so that you can populate and fill this binder. And all of these materials are available online as well, so that members of the public can also benefit from the work and the materials the same materials that the committee is looking through. And we're going to go over a little planning block review, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute and give you guys some time to look at that, and then talk about next steps and let you guys go for the night. So, what are the goals for this process, and why are we here? So tonight's goals for tonight are to familiarize you with that background report and the maps and tools. We want to talk about establish and begin the norms for committee engagement, and then review those planning blocks. Those are the real objectives of tonight's meeting. Talking about the committee represents each school community. There are 13 members on this group with 9 voting members. 3 principals sit on this, and principals that are in this study area, and they are non-voting members. We have 3 teacher and staff representatives, and then also 6 parents, which represent 2 from each school. And then also 1 area educational advisory council representative. So you could see we have a well-rounded group, people from all different areas of the study area to help deliberate on this and work through this process. What we ask you to do is that you suspend your parochial interests. So that means what we ask is that you take off your parent hat when you come into these meetings and put on your committee member hat and focus on developing a plan and developing recommendations or options at this point that best meets the needs of all children in this area. It may happen that the area that you live in may be impacted, and that happens quite often. But you really need to think big picture here and think about a plan and developing options that best meet the needs of all children in this area. We ask that you attend all meetings, and there will be 7 meetings between now and December, and then you guys will be working together and ultimately presenting recommendation to the Board of Education, which will be presented by the community superintendent and myself at the board meeting. Okay? Like I said, we are Cropper GIS Consulting. We do this kind of work all over the United States, and this is our specialty. And I am Matthew Cropper, and have about 20 years experience in this, and honored to be working with you guys and on this process. Looking at the calendar, you can see the meeting schedule here that as it goes, and this is where we are right now. This has just an overview of the agendas and the topics that we want to discuss at each particular meeting. Really, the focus and the first 4 meetings here is to develop maps and some options that we can take to the public to get further input from the public and solicit some input from them and get feedback from them. So we're not really looking to develop a perfect plan right now and to figure out which one is the best option. What I would encourage you to do as we start this process, especially the next meeting, which is when we're going to start looking at options, we want you to think outside the box and think about how many different options could possibly be considered, and then we'll go through a process of narrowing those down. And then after the public information session, once we present a subset of those options that you feel best meet the overall objectives and criteria, we'll be meeting 2 more times to finalize recommendations, which will be presented in February of next year. The recommendation to the board. They'll have a series of hearings, and then the board decision in March of 2020 is when the board is expected to vote on a plan for this particular study. So why is there a need for a boundary study? So as of September 30th, 2018, Pleasant Plains Elementary was over capacity by 122 students, 122% utilized. Its enrollment is anticipated to continue to increase, and I've talked with a couple of parents from the Pleasant Plains area, and from what I understand, that is happening. It's still going up, and so there still is no relief through demographics, and so there is a need to take a look at providing relief to this school. The limited relief options do exist, and so what we're looking at in this area is bringing these 3 buildings into the picture to see what can we do to try to balance utilization between the schools within this particular study area. No other schools outside of the study area that we're looking at are anticipated to be impacted as part of this. Middle schools and high schools are also not expected to be impacted as part of this. It's strictly elementary boundary changes that we are looking at. What relief strategies were considered? And so there's basically, if you look at this, this shows you the different relief strategies that could be considered. From simple to complex. So some of the simple strategies are capacity analysis and room use recommendations. So that's basically seeing, can we make use of spaces that may be used for resource or maybe teachers' rooms and things like that. Those immediately, the first thing, those go away and those become classroom spaces. Sometimes you'll see it in even spaces that aren't necessarily a classroom. We have exhausted, the district has exhausted all space use compromises for this. So they've implemented that strategy. Use of relocatable classrooms. There are 8 units for the 2019-20 school year that are on that site. And so they already have put relocatables out there to help provide relief. And there is limited space on the site, so there really is no more space available to add more of those portable relocatable units. So that has been exhausted as well. Enrollment caps and annexing, so sometimes they'll cap a grade level or cap the enrollment of a school, and if somebody moves in, they annex them to another school outside of the area. And the annexation of grade grade levels is not viable in this process. You want to maintain a community school concept, have students attend school closest to their home and things like that. So that's not being considered. And then here we are with the redistricting process, looking at boundary studies, trying to figure out how can we move lines to make best use of the space in this study area. Beyond that, it goes to renovations and additions and new capital construction, which is not something that we're focused on. We're really looking at using the existing space of the buildings in this particular study area. Talking about that, the participating schools in here, so when considering schools that could provide capacity relief to Pleasant Plains Elementary, Hampton Elementary and Halstead Elementary provided the most reasonable options. There are few schools in the area with additional capacity available. You'll see that there's Cromwell is in the middle of this area, and there was a boundary established for Cromwell a few years ago that basically that boundary around Cromwell is entirely walkable. So that is not under consideration here because that has already been established and all the students within that area can walk to school, and so Cromwell is not part of our study and not part of the picture here to provide capacity relief. Halstead Academy shares some neighborhoods that could walk to either school as well, and you'll see there's some plot maps that show you walk boundaries, and then also you'll see what we call walk-out boundaries. The walk-out boundaries are boundaries that are not the current walk areas, but areas that could feasibly walk to the school. So that's something just to keep in mind as you're looking at developing options and things like that for your benefit. And it should be noted, too, that the capacity numbers that we're working with do reflect the 2019 state-rated capacity. So capacity is something that is evaluated every year at the state level, and the capacity numbers that you're working with are reflective of the most recent approved state-rated capacity. So the objective is to community-based comprehensive boundary study is tasked with meeting these following key objectives. So these are really why we need to what we need to determine to determine if this is a successful study. And when it's all said and done, you have to ask yourself, have we accomplished these objectives? And these are to provide capacity relief at Pleasant Plains Elementary, support diversity among schools that reflect the community and school system, and create viable and successful boundaries to effectively utilize available capacity at adjacent schools. So the real thing of that is give Pleasant Plains some relief without overcrowding other buildings and being mindful of all of these other factors. We want to make efficient use of capacity in affected schools and maintain or increase the diversity among schools to reflect the region and the school system. These are primary considerations that are basically rules that the school district has established. You'll see it referred to as Rule 1280, and the school board has has established a set of rules that every committee that gets together like this looks at to try to determine what rules do we follow. Are we adhering better to these rules, or are we deviating further away by looking at options? And as you guys start to look at options, and especially when we start to narrow them down, you start to ask yourself, what is the best? What best adheres to these rules and guidelines? And so they are to make efficient use of capacity, maintaining or increasing diversity among schools to reflect the region of the school system, and these are the primary considerations. So they kind of take a little bit more precedent than the other rules. The secondary considerations are maintaining the continuity of neighborhoods. Try not to split the line down a residential street if at all possible. Trying to keep neighborhoods intact, but thinking of kids having friends and things like that after school, you're barbecuing with people and neighbors and things like that. You want to maintain that social dynamic as much as possible and not draw the line down the middle of a residential street. And so that's something that we want to be mindful of. The impact of transportation and pedestrian patterns on students. So looking at the transportation and the distance that students may have to travel to school currently versus any particular option. Minimize the number of times any students are reassigned, so don't move the same set of students more than once. And that's not part of this, that's not really applicable here because this area hasn't been looked at in quite some time. Long-term enrollment and capacity trends and future capital plans. So not only looking at the current number of students that live inside each of these areas and within the study area, but also looking at what is the forecasted enrollment looking like? Which areas are going to grow? Are some areas growing more than others? And so being mindful of not only current, but the future. Location of feeder school boundaries and continuity of feeder patterns. So like I said, we're not looking at middle and high school, but we will be analyzing the impact on feeder patterns and how many students transfer from elementary to middle. A feeder pattern is basically a term for the progression from elementary to middle and middle to high school. So what percentage of an elementary splits to a middle school if it has to split? It's best practice if an elementary school has to split to a middle school that it's more of a balanced split, if at all possible. So a 50-50 split is better than, say, a 95% of an elementary going to one middle and 5% going to another. And that's something that sometimes you can't avoid that because just the nature of the geography, but it's something that we will be studying and we'll be giving you data to inform you on that. Phasing in boundary changes by grade level for high schools, so that doesn't apply to us because we're looking strictly at elementaries. And additional things to consider that are best practices is using geographic features such as railroads, creeks, and major highways to draw the lines. And that basically helps enable an efficient boundary model as it relates to the geography in the area. So we want to assure equity and accessibility in this process and make sure everybody is involved and has an opportunity to participate. Translation of materials is available upon request. We do have a translator here. If we do have somebody who needs translation services, that was what the opening statement was, to notify anybody who needed translation in Spanish that we have that available. These meetings are all recorded on video. This is actually being recorded right now, and so this is all saved and stored, and then the copy of the video is posted online along with the materials. So anybody can go back and look at the video, and people who couldn't make it to this meeting as well can go back and watch the video and see how things are have unfolded within the process, within the committee's work. As I said, we still have translators here, but we also have translators at the public information session when we invite the public out. And there will be an online survey to accompany that public information session where we'll survey the public and ask their thoughts about the options and get some input as it relates to the rules and things like that. And those will also be translated to multiple languages. And all committee and business decisions should be conducted at these committee meetings. So what we ask that you don't do, we don't want you to go and try to, let's say, invite the neighborhood association over to your house and have a boundary study meeting and try to get people together, because what that happens is it starts to disconnect the process, and the rest of the committee can't benefit from that, from conversations that you're having. So we prefer, we have plenty of meetings in this process, and we prefer the work of the committee to be at the committee meetings. Not to say you can't study things off the clock, but please keep the committee's work at the committee so that the full committee can benefit from everyone's discussions. We do have snow days scheduled on the calendar, so keep a note of that. And we hope to not have to use those, but sometimes going through the winter, it could be possible. So if schools are closed, that means that your committee meeting will not occur. All evening meetings are canceled as well. So be mindful of the snow dates that are listed on the calendar. There's a boundary study website. If you go to bcps.org, you'll see a little link that says Boundary Studies, and you can go on there, and then you can find the Pleasant Plains process, and all the materials will be posted on there as we work through this. You can always email the board or the committee with input at boundarystudy@bcps.org. So the public can email comments to them. Those comments are being studied and tracked, and then we will share those with you guys as a committee as the public provides input, so that we make sure that you can benefit and understand what's being said by members of the public, so that you can study their thoughts as well. Public can also attend any committee meetings and attend a public information session on October 30th, like I had mentioned. And you can watch this on live stream. I think in addition to it being recorded, this is live stream, so it's actually live right now. So the night of the meeting, you can watch these meetings. And then there's a public hearing. Once the recommendation is made, the Board of Education will host a public hearing on February 26th, and that's where members of the public can go to the school board and voice some of their thoughts as it relates to the recommendation. So there's many ways to provide input from the start to the finish in this process. We have a background report, and the background report is what you'll see inside your document here. It's within a tab called Background, and this is basically a starting point. It's a document that gives you some information about the study area that relates to facilities and enrollment and things like that. The purpose of this is to expand the knowledge of each committee member and to help you share a message that's consistent and accurate. So what I ask you not to do is don't speculate on anything. Somebody asks you, what's the utilization of that school, or what's the enrollment of that school? Well, I think it's this or that. You can go to the background report and pull that right up and find information that's more definite in there, so you don't have to speculate. I would just say study this report after this meeting, and you can even look into it more tonight. You'll see those considerations that I listed earlier on page 1, the timelines on page 4, as well as a full-page timeline at the very beginning of your binder. We have enrollment facility tables on page 9, and then the maps are in the back on page 11, just some initial maps to help support this process. Things like with the mapping, people are pretty used to maps now. Scale bar, north arrow, legend. What I would say is that just basically, if you want to know what the map is saying, always look at the title, and that'll help you define what's being depicted on the map. And the legend will help you understand what the background colors mean, and what where the schools, which ones are school points, and what those are, and things like that. One of the things that's important to talk about are planning blocks. So planning blocks are basically small areas to examine student populations. So what we've done is we take each attendance boundary and we break it up into small segments. Think about it as pieces of a puzzle that they're really the building blocks for redistricting, or for when we start looking at moving boundaries. The intent of these planning blocks is to try to keep communities together, and if a community has to move, it moves, the planning block moves in its entirety. So this helps enable you with the ability to know how many kids are living in each planning block. You'll notice that within each block, there's a planning block ID number. So community members may start to tell you, I live in planning block 100, and these are my thoughts. That lets you guys go right down into the area to focus on the area below the attendance area level that is giving you that input. And then also within that shows the number of students that live within that planning block that goes to their zoned school. So that way we're preserving students that may enroll in and out of a school for open enrollment reasons or special programs, and we're only moving students in this process that go to their regular zoned school as part of this work. So each planning block you'll see it's a black and white dashed outline, and within that's a planning block ID and the number of students that live inside that block that attends their zone school. And so that's a really useful thing. And part of our exercise tonight is for you guys to look at those planning blocks, give us feedback, and think of, is there anything with those planning blocks that need to be modified? Are we splitting a neighborhood in half? Are we drawing it down a residential street? Should it be modified to try to best adhere to the rules that I have stated? There's a live-attend analysis that we do as part of this work, and this basically shows you the number of students that live in zones, number of students that attend a school, and then also, more importantly, the number of students that are coming in from out of zone or students that are coming out in. So when you look at the live-attend, you'll see This top one shows you the number of students that live inside each particular zone across the top. And these show you the number of students that are enrolled in the buildings. And then from here, you can see the green diagonal shows you this number of students that live inside the boundary that attends their boundary school. And then anything outside of this represents students that live out but attend in. So in this case, there are 12 students that live out of the study area that attend Halstead Academy, or 8 students that live out of the study area that go to Hampton. And so, but you could see within the study area, there's not many students going to other schools within here. There are 3 students that live in Halstead that go to Pleasant Plains, and 1 that lives in Hampton that goes to Pleasant Plains. That's kind of how you would read that. Yes, do we have a microphone?
Is this only accounting for students who are enrolled in public schools?
Yes, these are only Baltimore County Public School students. That's correct. Yes, let's microphone for you.
Are these numbers based on last year's or current? Because that's not Hampton's current.
Okay, so these are the 18-19 enrollment numbers as they sit right now. And so they are the 18-19. The 2019-20 enrollment is still being finalized. It has not been determined, finalized yet. And so we are working with 18-19 enrollment numbers as it sits right now.
So following up on that, will you be making adjustments to, I mean, this is from September 30th, but a month later there was an extra almost 70 kids at Pleasant Plains that are still there.
Yes, and Baltimore County Public Schools, remind me, what is our process with updating enrollment? Are we working with September 30th, 2018 data through the course of the study, or will we be updating with new enrollment as the study, when that data is available?
When the data is available, we'll be providing the committee some preliminary 2019 numbers. There's a whole process that goes through to be finalized through the state MSDE, but we will, as soon as we have preliminary numbers available to you after 9:30, we'll be bringing them back to the committee so you can get an idea of where they are today.
Yes, and so we want to make sure we inform you and give you all the information that we can, but we don't want to give you data that's too early and such. And so we are being mindful of that, absolutely. We do have some norms and expectations as you guys start to collaborate and work together, and these are things that we go over with every committee. So what we ask is that you be inclusive by allowing each group member to adequate time and space to voice their ideas and opinions, and don't and allow wait time between their responses, and be respectful of everybody's thoughts and observations and comments. Spend adequate time considering how each proposed change will impact diverse stakeholders. Be mindful of those boundary study considerations that we've talked about as you work through this collaborative process. And if a conflict arises, just be mindful of your tone and body language. Use I statements to avoid blame and to clarify points and or feelings. And then just expect that there may be non-closure. I think understand that no plan is going to be perfect when this is all said and done. There will be pros and cons with any boundary recommendation. I don't think you should expect that any recommendation is going to perfectly adhere to all of these rules as a whole. In particular, all of them, you're not going to adhere to all of them. The best plan is going to be one that addresses those rules as best as possible while still accomplishing our objectives, knowing that there will be pros and cons, or it's not going to be a perfect solution, just because of the nature of geography and schools and how the communities are laid out in the area. So what we want to do is we want to do what we call an opportunity analysis. So this is basically a four-cornered grid, the strengths, limitations, opportunities, and challenges. It basically helps support the conversation, and it really helps let you guys brainstorm some of the key issues that are in this area. And it also helps you guys just start to get used to working together as a group and starting those small group conversations, because we'll be doing a lot of that through this process. What we want you to do is break into two groups, and we already have them in their two groups. Isn't that correct? So you guys see the blue group and the red group. So you're already in your two groups, and this is how you guys are going to work on this process. You'll see you have both teams have a flip chart over here that lists that shows the four-corner grid. And what we want you to do is to consider and discuss the following, and just have an open brainstorming discussion. What are the strengths and limitations of the current boundaries? And what are the opportunities and challenges as the committee creates new boundary options? So I will leave this up and let you guys work through that. We let you use the flip chart to record your group, so somebody can record the information, and somebody as you guys start to brainstorm. And we'll reconvene in about 15 minutes to share with the whole group. Couple things before I go back is that we'll have somebody can be a sort of a discussion guide and sort of help talk through it. And then as a reporter, somebody can record the information, and the scribe records the information. The reporter will actually share out to the whole group. And then there's also a parking lot attendant. So you'll see there's a separate sheet of paper here that if there's questions that are being asked that are not really relevant to the boundaries, the boundary study process, things that are not, that really are part of our focus that you may want to have answered, you can put that in what we call the parking lot, and you can write those down, and those are things that we'll follow up with you as well. Does anybody have any questions about this exercise? Okay, so we're going to let you guys do some work here, and in about 15 minutes we'll regroup. So you guys can go ahead, and we'll talk to you in a second, and we'll be walking around to help as well. Okay, guys, let's give it about, maybe just wrap up your comments on the on your four-cornered grids here, and then we're going to regroup in just about 5 minutes or less, okay? Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and reconvene and let the committees start to report out. So if we could, Mr. Bricado has a microphone. Why don't we start with the red group here, and let's have the red group share some of their thoughts. Maybe what you could do is if you could stand up in front of the table. And you guys can just point to your chart and just share with the rest of the group some of the conversations that you had on this exercise. Sure, if you could stand and maybe just go through some of the conversations, and that would be helpful. Thank you.
So do you want me to go through sort of strengths, limitations?
Sure,
that way?
However you prefer. You can list it and then go over it however you prefer.
Okay, so I guess just from a strengths, limitations perspective, I mean, we do value the fact that all of these schools are very community-based, and there is large, clusters of families within their, very close proximity. As the kind of area expands away from the schools, there are actually a lot of communities that are cut in half, so that makes things more difficult. As far as opportunities and challenges, there are, just looking at the map, looks like there's areas that, could be adjusted, some areas that look like they're more walkable to Halstead, but it seems that adjusting those areas potentially lead to overcrowding at Halstead, so you're just moving from one to the other. You're also dividing communities when you do that, and potentially that doesn't really have that much an effect on Pleasant Plains because of the numbers of students that are in those areas.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else from the group want to add anything else that, in addition to that? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move to this group. Who wants to report out some of the conversations that you guys had?
All right, fine. All right. You guys stole our thunder a little bit. Or maybe we're just like-minded and we're all good on this. So strengths and limitations. Some of the strengths that we mentioned were also community, that all of these schools have very strong communities and support. We decided or mentioned that Hampton no longer has trailers, so that's a strength in terms of its population, that there aren't trailers on site anymore because of the new addition. And then another strength are some of the resources available to Pleasant Plains because of the Title I funding. Some limitations, obviously, overcrowding, we know that. The size of the cafeteria and the lack of bathrooms, and then Pleasant Plains is just straight up out of land. Opportunities and challenges. Reduced class size is an opportunity, which is obviously why we're here and exploring. Less stress on faculty, parents, students, and the facility. We also mentioned it might be nice to have clearer boundaries for community members when you're buying a home or thinking about relocating, knowing what feeds into which school, and then to that point, to be able to reunite some of the communities that have been divided by boundaries. And then finally, challenges. Always there's the community upheaval. It's hard to move. Transportation could be a challenge with buses and bus routes, and based on the distance and the busier streets. And then feeder patterns for middle school is something we'd have to pay attention to make sure you're not asking schools to then divide at higher rates than they've been dividing. You need to account for new construction in the area. That was one of our follow-up questions, is there's a lot of building, especially in sort of the downtown Towson area, and how would those populations factor in going forward? And then finally, transferring students and teachers. So a lot of the teachers that are beloved at schools, then having to move is always hard too.
Thank you. Yeah. And is there any other comments from this group that you guys want to add to that? I think you guys were very good. Both groups were pretty comprehensive. So we're going to collect these after the meeting, and we'll put this into a little summary document for you guys and bring that to the next meeting so that you can have that, and also the public can see the results of that particular exercise. But I think you've laid it out, some of the things that you're dealing with, and some of the things that you're going to be coming up against, and some of the opportunities that we have to help provide relief to this area. So that's good. We want to do another exercise here, and we're going to let you guys break back into groups. And this is one where I see several of you guys have started looking at the maps, and that's a good thing. You're starting to get familiar with the maps. That's fine. You're getting a little ahead of us, but that's perfectly fine. You guys are, like you said, overachievers. So you have a large planning block map, and so basically it's the map that shows the current boundaries in the green, purple, and orange, and those are the current boundaries. And then on those you'll see the planning blocks, like I have directed and pointed to you guys about. So what we want you to do is dive into that map and look at that map and see what you think about those planning blocks. Are there any subdivisions or neighborhoods that are split in those particular planning blocks? Maybe as you have markers on your tables, you're more than welcome to mark up those maps. You can circle planning blocks that you may have concerns with, or even draw lines along it where maybe a suggested change should be made to that planning block. And so we're going to give you about 15 to 20 minutes to work with that, and then we're going to get back together. Now, do you guys have any questions about that? Just diving into those planning block maps and seeing how those planning blocks look. So we'll go ahead and let you get back into that. let's see about maybe 5 minutes for you guys just to sort of finalize some of your observations of the planning blocks, and we'll get back together. So maybe 5 minutes or less, and we'll regroup, okay? All right. Okay, I think it's time for us to regroup. I see you guys are looking at the blocks. You're being really proactive and already looking at which areas could potentially be moving and things like that. So really applaud your efforts. Maybe what we do is, if we could have each group just kind of maybe summarize their thoughts. I'm really encouraged by the energy that each group has and their conversations around the maps and everything. So maybe, why don't we start with this group first this time? And why don't you just tell us some of your thoughts? You know, are there any planning blocks that you think need to be modified, or any other conversations you had? If you could hold the map up too, so that we could all see what you guys are looking at, and then we can all benefit from that. So,
All right. So we were looking at planning block 201, 209, and 210, and we were kind of saying like that would make sense to be more in the Hampton zone, just because there obviously wasn't that many residents there anyway, so it would easily be changed. To move up. That was one of like a simple area. And then we were kind of looking down in the Halsted area, the Hills Way, and trying to make that a little more easier with just road divides to kind of make it. And we were kind of toying with two different options, you know, adding like, Taylor kind of being the line marking a little bit just to make it more distinct for families and for that community. So we were just kind of looking at different.
Did you guys see anything in the planning blocks where you're like, wow, that splits through a residential street that needs to be tweaked or moved over another road? Anything like that you guys identified?
Yeah, I mean, Greenbrier is currently divided. So there's a block of houses that are Hampton, and then the rest of the neighborhood is not. And then I think, is this Knollwood? Knollwood is also, well, we also circled Knollwood.
Yeah, and you can see that we do adhere to the current boundary lines when we draw those blocks. So if the current boundaries do split a neighborhood and things like that, that's something that, you know, we may be able to resolve in this process, certainly. But it's notable. It's good to note the areas that are split with the current boundaries, in addition to some of our little subset blocks that we have drafted for you guys.
Oh yeah, and then we were looking at, what is this random Halsted dot?
Yeah, yes.
I don't think it even, is that its number? 319.
Yes, you know, I talked with the, I've talked with the school district about that. I think that was done, the history of that is it was done for transportation reasons and picking students up along that street. But that's, could you explain more, Chris?
So I think what we found with that little block, you see that little orange block, when I look at Halstead's boundary, I almost think of a little puppy dog. It looks like a little Scotty dog with a head up there. So if you look at his little tiny tail kind of coming up, you see he's got a little tiny tail with that last planting block there. What that's reflective of is a range of streets that is captured along there. It's what that street is coming up there. That's is this?
I think it's Oakley.
Yeah, Oakley Road. So it's simply a range of Oakley Road addresses that's captured by Halstead Academy. Certainly an opportunity to perhaps clean that up as you look at solutions. But currently that range of houses, and it doesn't look like it's even occupied. It's got a 0 there. So it may be a few houses in that range that are captured, and it looks weird on a map, but it's simply a reflection of what range is currently on Oakley Road currently is assigned to Halstead.
Yeah, so good observations. You're seeing some of the potential inefficiencies in the current zones and ways to maybe help resolve those and better adhere to your to the rules and things like that. It's a good opportunity that you guys have. Do you guys want to share anything else? Any other conversations that you had during this little block of time? Okay. Why don't we bring the mic over to the other group and see if the blue group has anything to add to that.
I don't know that we have that much to add. I mean, we were really focused on the same areas. I think it's especially in that area where Pleasant Plains butts up to Halstead. I mean, I'm sure that those lines are dividing neighborhoods. I mean, just based on the way the streets are together, and then we agree about the other side as well. We're talking about the same areas.
Good. Well, that's good that you guys are kind of in sync, even though you're working in two separate groups. And I would also encourage you, when we, as we continue to work on this, to use some of the other map resources that you have. There's an aerial imagery map that you could see kind of the distribution of homes and things like that. And Mr. Mercado also mentioned to both of you that there will be an online map, that online interactive map that we will have ready for you for the next committee meeting. And then you'll be able to turn that on any phone and zoom in and pinch zoom in and look at the boundaries up close so that you can kind of see the homes and how the lines are drawn as it relates to some of the real geography. Any other thoughts or comments from you guys? And sounds like you had a lot of similar conversations that this group had. Anything else you want to share? Yes, you have something else?
We took another look and we thought maybe Taylor should just be the divide, and I don't know what street this is. But for the bottom portion of under Taylor to go to Halstead, and then the rest to go to Hampton.
Okay. Okay. So you're giving good thoughts and things that may be able to drive maps and new maps and things like that. So I think that's certainly fruitful conversation and things that are really productive that we can build on. And so we really appreciate the conversations you guys are having and some of the thought that you're putting into this already, even in advance of the next meeting when we start looking at options. So just a little preview of the next meeting. We will be bringing a couple of scenarios that we'll start the conversation with. We call them just draft option, baseline options that we bring to you to kickstart the conversation. You guys have already brought some of these, so we may even take some of these concepts and build those into some of those, so that we can so that you can kind of see the cause and effects as it relates to enrollment and some of the other statistics and information. So our next meeting is going to be Thursday, September 26th, so we're about 2 weeks out from that. I should note that is isn't after the public information session, the meetings are going to go on Wednesday? Is that what it is? So our meetings are going to be on Thursdays on the timeline all the way until the public info session. And then once that public info session is after that, those last 2 meetings, they're going to be on Wednesday nights. So just look your calendars, mark your calendars for the meeting dates, and I'm sure you guys have done that already. So we're looking forward to that next meeting to share some of these maps with you, really start to dive into the options and see which different ways that that the boundaries can be shaped to accomplish our objectives. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, did you want to say something, Ms. Appler?
Cafeteria, not here. So when we get to the public information session, it will be at Lock Raven High School in their cafeteria. Okay?
Yes, it won't be at Lock Raven Academy, at Lock Raven High School. So, yes. Any other questions or thoughts or comments from you guys before we let you go home tonight? Well, thank you very much. We're really encouraged by this group and this process, so we look forward to working with you here in a couple of weeks. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.